For decades, FIFA operated with a simple assumption. When FIFA made a decision, football followed expand. A tournament? Accepted. Add more matches? Accepted. Change? Accepted. But something unusual is happening before the biggest World Cup in history. Not protests outside stadiums, not angry fans on social media, something far more dangerous. Europe's football institutions are openly challenging FIFA's authority. Players' unions are filing legal complaints. Domestic leagues are accusing FIFA of putting profit ahead of football. Labor organizations are questioning whether the modern football calendar is becoming unsustainable. And just days before the opening match of World Cup 2026, the organization that controls global football finds itself facing a challenge from the people who know the game best. This isn't a boycott story, it's a power struggle over who actually controls football's future. For years, nobody challenged FIFA, and that may have been the problem. Modern football has become an enormous global industry worth billions of dollars. At the center sits FIFA. Every 4 years, the World Cup generates enormous revenue, television audiences, sponsorship deals, and political influence. Over time, FIFA expanded its ambitions: more teams, more matches, more tournaments, more commercial opportunities. World Cup 2026 represents the biggest expansion in tournament history. 48 national teams, 104 matches, 3 host nations. A tournament larger than anything football has ever attempted before. From FIFA's perspective, expansion represents growth, more countries participating, more fans engaged, more money entering the sport. But critics inside European football began asking a different question. If every expansion creates more revenue for FIFA, who absorbs the cost? Clubs lose players for longer periods, domestic leagues struggle with scheduling. Athletes face increased workloads. Recovery periods become shorter. What FIFA sees as growth, others increasingly see as strain. And that disagreement slowly evolved into open conflict. Then the disagreement moved out of boardrooms and into legal institutions. For years, football politics happened behind closed doors. Executives negotiated. Stakeholders complained privately. Disputes rarely became public. That changed when European football organizations decided to challenge FIFA through formal legal channels. Instead of issuing angry statements, they submitted complaints. Instead of criticizing tournament expansion in interviews, they brought their arguments to regulators. The central accusation is remarkably simple. FIFA acts as football's regulator while simultaneously acting as a commercial organizer benefiting from its own decisions. Critics argue that the organization responsible for governing the sport also profits directly from expanding competitions. Whether regulators ultimately agree remains uncertain, but the significance lies elsewhere. Major football institutions are no longer treating FIFA as an untouchable authority. They are treating FIFA as an organization that can be challenged. That psychological shift may prove more important than any legal outcome. Because once institutions start questioning power, they rarely stop after a single complaint. And behind every legal document is a human body. Football calendars have never been more crowded. Elite players now compete across domestic leagues, domestic cups, continental tournaments, international breaks, pre-season tours, and expanded global competitions. For fans, more football sounds exciting. For players, it often means less recovery, less rest, less protection against injury. The concern isn't theoretical. Every season produces new examples of exhausted athletes, overloaded schedules, and serious injuries. Clubs invest hundreds of millions into players whose bodies are increasingly stretched across year-round competition. National teams want access to their stars. Clubs want their investments protected. Sponsors want visibility. Broadcasters want inventory. Everyone benefits from more matches except the one person physically required to play them, the player. And that's why player welfare has become one of the most powerful criticisms surrounding World Cup 2026. Not because football is dying, but because football may be demanding more from its athletes than ever before. But workload isn't the only complaint. Across Europe, a broader frustration is beginning to emerge. Some believe FIFA increasingly makes decisions without meaningful consultation. Others argue that football's governing structures have become too centralized. Then there is the growing debate about consistency. Why are certain issues addressed aggressively while others appear to receive less attention? Why do some political situations trigger immediate responses while others generate silence? These questions are becoming louder across football media, supporter groups, and institutional organizations. They don't always produce the same answers, but they reveal something important. Confidence is becoming harder to maintain. Trust, once lost, is difficult to rebuild. And trust is ultimately the currency that every governing body depends upon. FIFA still possesses extraordinary power, but power and trust are not the same thing. One can survive without the other for a while, not forever. But what FIFA didn't expect was where the criticism would come from next. For years, FIFA was accustomed to criticism from outside football. Politicians complained, activists protested, journalists investigated. Those challenges were often uncomfortable, but they were predictable. What makes the current situation different is that many of the loudest concerns are now emerging from inside football itself. Club executives, league officials, player representatives, and even former football administrators are increasingly asking the same question. Has football reached a point where expansion has become the objective rather than the consequence of success? Every new competition creates more content creates more broadcasting revenue, more revenue creates pressure for even more expansion. The cycle appears endless. Yet, football is not a streaming platform. It cannot manufacture infinite inventory without consequences. Every additional match requires players to run, recover, travel, and perform at elite levels. Every additional tournament competes for space on a calendar that already appears crowded, and every commercial success creates expectations for the next one to be even bigger. That reality has sparked a deeper debate across Europe. Is football becoming too large for its own ecosystem? Some believe expansion is necessary to keep the sport growing globally. Others fear that growth without limits eventually weakens the product itself. More matches can sometimes make individual matches feel less important. More tournaments can make historic competitions feel less unique. The concern is not that football is becoming unpopular. The concern is the opposite. Football has become so successful that governing bodies may be tempted to push the system beyond its natural limits, and perhaps that is the most uncomfortable question facing FIFA before World Cup 2026. Not whether this tournament will succeed, it almost certainly will. Not whether millions will watch, they will. The real question is whether football's leaders are protecting the long-term health of the game or maximizing short-term opportunities while the sport remains at the peak of its global power. Because those are not always the same thing. And the answer may determine what football looks like 10 years from now. And this is where the story becomes bigger than one World Cup. The matches will happen. The stadiums are ready. NBA PP will play. Messi may be preparing for his final World Cup appearance. Millions will watch. The football itself remains irresistible. But the real significance of this moment may only become visible years from now. Because every complaint, every legal challenge, every regulatory investigation contributes to a larger conversation. Who owns football? Is it governed primarily for fans, for players, for clubs, for leagues, or for the institutions that organize it? Those questions aren't being asked by outsiders anymore. They are being asked from within, football itself. The organizations challenging FIFA are not enemies of the sport. They are part of the system. And when members of a system begin questioning its structure, Change often follows, maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but eventually. Few days before kickoff, World Cup 2026 remains the biggest football event ever created. The crowds will arrive, the goals will be scored, new heroes will emerge. Yet, beneath the excitement, another contest is unfolding, not on the pitch, in courtrooms, regulatory offices, labor organizations, and football boardrooms across Europe. FIFA's authority isn't collapsing. But for perhaps the first time in years, it is being questioned by institutions powerful enough to matter. The outcome won't be decided during 90 minutes. It may not even be decided this summer. But long after the final whistle in New Jersey, the battle over football's future will continue, and the decisions made after this tournament may shape the game for an entire generation.